Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com with this week's episode of the Market Monday. So this week we are going to talk about how the market has shifted back towards standard. We have some massive price spikes in all of the guilds that have not been released yet. So all the cards from Dominaria, M19, and the Rivals block of the Orzhov slash Simic slash Rakdos. Those are the main ones that have started to spike up. I'm sure we can see some of the other color pairings like Gruul. There's some goodies in Gruul, for example, and we'll actually look at these in depth about cards that are seeing a lot of movement and where I think they'll go. Take a look at kind of where the meta is at the moment and see if any of these archetypes have any chance in hell of actually breaking out. Now, so far, spoils have been okay from Ravnica Allegiance. I haven't been too impressed, especially from the Mythic slot. Maybe we'll take a look at the Mythics and we can give some analysis on those. Usually I just do spoiler videos for those without bleeding into the more Market Monday scene. But anyway, before we get started, let's look over to a little fundraiser I've got going on. If you've been watching the channel for about a week, I've been doing a fundraiser for my buddy who his reef, it'd be better if his reef was leaking. His roof is leaking, and a little bit of backstory about that. He runs a business, a daycare out of his house, and when they went to file a claim on the roof, then the insurance company just dropped him out of the blue. And then when your insurance gets dropped, then it leads you open to a bunch of just legal issues with having to have insurance on your business premises and to be able to provide service. And so it led to a massive panic. It was just right after Christmas, right after, of course, they kind of splurged on Christmas. So I gave my buddy a loan to get things rolling, and we're trying to raise about six grand worth of money to get the roof repaired. And how we're doing that is he's actually selling out his entire collection. Now, this is a modern player, been playing for years, so the collection is around $6,000 is how much he has ponied up. And we have these over here in two spreadsheets. One is I've donated a bunch of cards from my store to help it get going. And then we also have his from his modern staples. So I'll have the links in the description below of how you can purchase cards. Now, again, we're not begging for money. I'm not about e-begging. I'm all about, personal responsibility, and that this is how you do it. Personal responsibility. Something happens, you have to give up things you love to get those things repaired. So in this case, the roof is more important. The job is more important than a bunch of modern cards. So anyway, we've got these modern cards up here for what I want to be selling around reasonable between the buy list. He was just going to buy list all the cards and said, hey, just give me some time. I'll try to get you a little more money if we can get between the buy list and the TCG market price. I think that's pretty fair. It's a steal of a deal for everyone that does want these cards. You can see we've already sold a bunch of cards here, and it makes us a little more than the buy list would, and you get to save some if you would be buying these cards anyway from the TCG market. So you can come over here. I've got these averaged out. How I did this is just use the best buy list price and then the TCG market price at the time, made an average between the two, and that's what we have for the asking price. So huge shout out to everyone who has I keep wanting to say donated, purchased, because it literally is a purchase. So for other people who have purchased towards this new roof being built, again, everything is in motion for the roof. Like I said, we got the down payment there. We just have to, pony up the rest of the money for when the due date comes. So we're hoping to have this sold by a month, 2 months at the latest. Hopefully we can get this sold quicker than that. Huge shout out to all those that have actually purchased things. We are up to $1,069.50 towards the $6,000 goal. I'm planning on doing some streams when my life becomes less hectic. My sister's having a baby. I don't know when I'll be driving down to help her out after she has her baby and then get everything back in motion. But I'm thinking about doing some streams. I've been playing some awesome MTG Arena matches, really getting into it. I have definitely analysis on MTG Arena about why you shouldn't even be trying for ranked. If you would just actually spend your time, if you hit like Platinum or Mythic, if you'd spend your time just doing the tournaments, you'd be so far ahead than what the rewards are going to give you from ranked. Basically, ranked is just about showing off. It's all about ego, and it is a massive grind. I do not like best of one. I think best of one is unintuitive. It's not very skill based. It's more matchup based. I know people can say that a lot about Magic, but I think where a lot of skill comes in on Magic is the sideboard, where you have a prepared sideboard for the meta and where you know how to side in and out cards. I think that determines just an average player towards an exceptional player. And without having that option, then everyone just becomes an average player on MTG Arena. However, anyway, we'll get off that topic now and get back to Market Monday. So Market Monday, we see a ton of movement. Last week we did see movement in the modern cards that really benefited the most from the Ultimate Masters. So there are cards like Worldspine Worm and the decks, Goryo's Vengeance, not Scapeshift, so it was Goryo's Vengeance decks and Dredge that had a lot of price increases. This week tends to be all about Standard. Now that's kind of a good sign for Standard. I love these Ravnica when it's very clear cut of what guilds are going to come out, and I'm actually liking the format this time of instead of going big small, because small sets tend not to have a lot of movement unless there's a breakout card in that small set. But if you go big, and especially if you go big all on 5 different guilds, then big on another 5 different guilds, almost always it's going to shake up the meta. And in this case, it definitely will shake up the meta because there are a lot of decks that just need fast mana. Merfolk's one of them. I think that Merfolk is actually very competitive towards Boros aggro, mono white aggro, has some game, has a lot of game actually versus like the control decks because you can run spell snares and negates, no problem. And then we also have Knights that I think are desperately wanting fast mana, and not to mention anything Gruul based, either it be dinosaurs or what have you out of anything come out of Gruul. They just want the more fast mana. It is a headache to and a lot of the 3-color pairings too. 3 and 4-color pairings I think become viable with this set. I know that I play a Dragons deck pretty religiously on MTG Arena, and one of the problems with the losses is when you have like 3 tap lands in your opening hand, and if any one of those would have been a shock land, you would win. If 3 tap lands, it just throws your curve off. I learned this lesson at Pro Tour Dragon's Maze when I used a lot of the guild gates, that if you're running any sort of mid-range based strategy, even though you think that you can handle, comes to play tap lands, a lot of times you can't. And the vast majority of my losses from Pro Tour Dragon's Maze were just because of a bad mana base, everything coming on a turn behind from the opponent. So I think this is exactly what has happened with the meta at the moment. Why we've have the defined meta that we have now is because the decks that have good mana are able to succeed, and the decks like Merfolk and the Knights especially, or some other these tribal decks, can't succeed because of just the bad mana. There have been some good spoilers. I think the -2/-2, and Exile all cards is the most impactful one. It's just strictly better than Golden Demise, and I think it actually really, really hurts a number of decks that try to get value off of things dying, or because there'll be the Hunted Witnesses, for example, or the Zombie Knight out of the Golgari deck that come back, and I think that actually might be enough to change up the meta. And we actually get some good tempo cards in this next set that I think might give Control a run for their money. So I'm hoping that we have a very balanced set again. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 viable decks would be, of course, ideal. The more the merrier, and we don't just have a runaway with something like Teferi or some sort of aggro deck that just steals the show, and we get kind of a boring meta. So anyway, let's just take a look at the cards that have had movement. We do see that Arclight Phoenix here has had a little bit of a rebound, but this card is on the downturn. I actually suggested if you have Arclight Phoenixes, the time is now to sell Arclight Phoenixes. I'm also very, very scared. I guess scared is not the right word because I could care less about Modern. But I think that cards like Manamorphose are starting to look like they might just be a little bit too warped for Modern. If there are anything on the chopping block, it could be a card like that, of just how it enables so many different of these decks. They've typically axed cards like this in the past, like Gitaxian Probe, cards that have no disadvantage for cantripping, and Arclight Phoenix definitely runs on that sort of axis, and it has started to take over the Modern meta. So if we look over here, it started off as just a, not even a tier deck, and now it's around 8% of the meta, and this is by going through Goldfish data, which takes the majority of the stuff from the dailies. One thing I got to tell you is that this sort of information is going to get a lot worse. If you come over and look at like even Standard and Pauper, it looks like Modern's still having a decent little showing on MTGO. We had there was one that I saw the other day had like 4 or 5 5-0 standard decks. That is showing that there are very few participants in that week with a very diverse meta and only 5 decks showing up. Pauper is even worse. There was a couple of them that only had very, very few 5-0 finishes when usually there'd be pages and pages. But if we look over here from the Grand Prix, we see Crackline Ironworks and Phoenix decks like crazy. A lot of people are talking that after Grand Prix Oakland, there's something on the chopping block for the Crackline Ironworks. My opinion would be something like Ancient Stirrings would be again, these cantrippy type cards are typically what they look at, and they can kind of kill two birds with one stone. Tron's in a bad place right now, so I don't know why they'd want to hit it. But again, it is these sort of cantrip cards that in the past they look at if they need to shake up the meta. A lot of people have also aired their grievances about this deck because of how boring it is to go through the process. Again, I'm not going to make any opinions on Modern because it's something that I've long since gone away from. So if you do have any cards in those specific two archetypes, I would be a little hesitant coming on the ban announcement. I typically don't know if this one will be enough time has passed or big enough tournaments have passed to make any judgment on a card that needs to go. But if you just keep looking over the list, it looks like the Phoenix is starting to run away with the numbers, and this is indicative of a 8%. Last week it was 5%. The week before that was 3%. This could be 11, 12, 13, start to get up to that range of where they need something to go. And this is just one of the Phoenix variants. There's actually more than one Phoenix variant. It seems to be that this thing in the Ice Phoenix is the deck that they're going with the Phoenix at the moment, but that could definitely change. There has been some innovations with this type of card, with like putting in Crackling Drakes in this slot, taking out like Bedlam Revers and whatnot. But again, I think that Manamorphose is a card that I've been eyeing quite closely for Modern. It typically does look like the card that they do go after. Again, they get taxing probe type cards, the Ponders, the Preordains, and Manamorphose can hit that if a deck like this starts to get out of hand. Anyway, that's enough about Modern. Again, not too much movement in the Modern scene. If we go over to the movers and shakers for the Modern, it hasn't been too active. I don't know why the weekly change here on Goldfish isn't showing up, but we did see the week before that a bunch of cards from the various decks that did get a handout from Ultimate Masters go up. So Standard, we're looking at some key mechanics of anything that was working on Afterlife is starting to go up. We saw Elandra, the Dusk Rose, spike up this week to $14.75. This, in my opinion, is a huge sell. I don't think that pairing with Teysa, even competing at that same 4-drop, is where you want to be. The Vampire decks had good mana before with the fast land from Kaladesh, and they didn't run Landa. It just doesn't have, and Knights too. Knights can also work with this card because it is a Knight, even though that doesn't matter as much. Lifelink 1/1 for 4 mana that has to equal creatures dying. We haven't seen a good sacrifice outlet sort of thing. It's very awkward in Standard with Exile. It's very awkward with Settle the Wreckage. And yeah, this card just takes too much to get going. This was a very hype card when it was first came out, immediately crashed. It's had a commander following for quite a while, but has never really seen any sort of Standard play. And I think that you should not buy into the hype. It looks like a white-black deck. Let's click on this one, see how old this one was. This one was from clear back in February. It was the last time a 5-0 deck showed this of a Vampire deck, and it ran a whopping none actually in this deck. So yeah, it just showed up sometime in a white-black Vampires list. And so a card that is unproven like this, this is a card you want to invest in after the fact, not before the fact. I don't like these type of speculation cards where it's like, okay, it hasn't proven itself. Let's go ahead and invest in it. Well, people might say it's Arclight Phoenix. Well, Arclight Phoenix was a totally different ball game at that point. It was a very undervalued mythic. It was one of the least expensive mythics in the set, and I just knew that card was going to be broken at some point in time. To me, that was a known quantity. Alana the Dusk Rose is something that I'm like, yeah, Rivals of Ixalan, it's definitely low supply comparatively to everything else in Standard. Maybe M19 is the other exception. However, the card is not like people haven't tried this card in the past. They've tried it, and it hasn't worked. And therefore, I think that investing in at the $7 mark, having it go up to 14 and still investing in it is a bad sign. This card has to come down. Divine Visitation, I give a little more credibility for it because I do actually play this, and it's a very powerful deck in a Boros token-based strategy. I don't like it in Celestia, and I don't like it in the Afterlife type effects. The deck that I do play it in at the moment is a Boros deck that runs heroic reinforcements as well as Legion War Boss, and it actually pairs up really well with Divine Visitation because against decks where you have to go over the top, this is your over the top card, and if against decks you have to swarm out against them or just aggro out, you're not going to end up casting it anyway. Hopefully it's not going to be in your hand, and it's just kind of a dead card, but it's the upside is worth it. This is kind of how I still see it with the Afterlife. I don't think that Afterlife is adding anything that March of the Multitudes doesn't add to make Divine Visitation actually playable, but it is it is approaching up. We have cards like Treasure Map that have gone up to $9. I still think that Treasure Map is going to continue to increase. It might be that next Ixalan card to hit the $15 mark because of how versatile it is and how many decks it's starting to see play in. And it's just a great little card. There's a few more treasures that have been spoiled, at least one treasure card that I can think of that have been spoiled out of the new set Ravnica Allegiance that have a little bit of synergy with the treasure map. However, the card has just proven itself for a great 2-drop slot, which is where this format wants to be, is have some sort of 2-drop fixer, whether it be Search for Azcanta, whether it be Revitalize, whether it be Treasure Map, these cantrip type cards. Like Treasure Map's great though. It doesn't seem bad in any matchup at the moment. It's really funny how the format is still incredibly fast, but still slowed down compared to the Kaladesh days to make it so you can get away with a card like Treasure Map. Another thing that has Treasure Map going for it is a Braid. A Braid, once that rotated, made cards like this playable, and slowly but surely Treasure Map has found its way into more and more and more lists. However, we do have a Braid 2.0, but it's a lot more narrow that the Rakdos decks can run it, and if they're going to be running it for more, it's going to be a 3 mana, so two black and a red. I don't know if they want to be using it towards a Treasure Map. I think it's kind of a win there at that scenario if they've actually used it on a Treasure Map. All in all, the Rootbound Crag type cards are starting to go back up. We have Vanquisher's Banner because there's a few more of the tribal scene coming back in. And other than that, the cards are quite, I mean, it's quite quiet at the moment. That's the word I'm looking for. I think that if you're going to invest in particular cards right now for the Ravnica Allegiance, we do have some goodies. So let's talk about those right now. The first one I do like is this Tocatli Honor Guard. It is on the way down. There are a ton more Enter the Battlefields that I think are very, very relevant out of the next set. I think that the Tocatli Honor Guard is very well positioned for many sideboard slots, as well as can go in it goes in aggressive, it goes in mid-range type decks, and can actually go into control decks. If we see like the Afterlife type decks actually start to shake up the meta, or Merfolk, I think it leaves the Angels deck open to really start to prey on these type of decks. So Tocatli Honor Guard will play double duty. It will take out the Fine Finality type decks from the black-green. The black-green might have to go into a little bit heavier on being more aggressive rather than being on the control route, and that means that Tocatli Honor Guard will punish that even more. And if we're looking at ETB type effects, a ton coming out of Gruul, tons coming out of Gruul, the whole mechanic coming out of Gruul, a lot coming out of Rakdos, a lot coming from those 4-mana spell cards. Tocatli Honor Guard is very, very well positioned. I think this will start to have an uptick again. I think that this never hit its true potential. The problem with Tocatli is the Angel deck kind of got weeded out very quickly into a tier 2 status, and the format came very, very polarized into the Drake decks, the heavy control Teferi decks, and the aggro decks, and then you also had the Fine Finality Golgari decks, and that was kind of the new meta. And Tocatli Honor Guard at the moment does not fit in that meta, but if we go back to a lot of these ETB type effects, now people have talked about how dinosaurs might be viable. There are actually a few ETB effects that Tocatli Honor Guard is decent against in that matchup. Not too many, but there is with at least the one that I'm thinking of now. Let's look at Ixalan right now for some cards that are seeing movement. So we have the interesting little buy list price of like Ripjaw Raptors and the Register Alpha. That's the card I'm looking for, is the ETB effect on the Register Alpha. Both of these, the buy list spread has started to basically evaporate. If we look over here from the Ixalan, the Alpha is market pricing at $1.33. Card Kingdom is up to, I think they're actually up to $1.40. I think this one is a little bit lagging behind. No, it's back down to 95 cents. There was a time where this was up to $1.40. A bunch must have been sold, and they dumped it back down. But that is a very, very slow, or very, very low spread for this card. And if we come over here also to the Ripjaw Raptor, you can kind of see the same thing. The market price is $2. The Card Kingdom buy list price is $1.50. That means there is a lot of movement in this card. And those are two specs that I think that even if they don't necessarily pan out, those are good things to start stockpiling on right now while they're still cheap, and then just unloading them into the hype. Other cards would be all the Merfolk cards in this set. So you have the Mythics that are going back up. You have cards even like Vona, Butcher of I believe this one had a very small buy list spread too. You have 2 to 250. This is kind of the set that I really, really like looking at more in depth, is the Ixalan and Rivals of Ixalan, because they did have a lot of those color pairings, a ton of those color pairings that didn't get printed in Guilds of Ravnica, and now are going to come in the Ravnica Allegiance. So looking through those, Vampires, Knights, a lot of Vampires are Knights. It'd be funny if you can get a combination of the two. Orzhov and Gruul and Simic and those type of cards should have a price spike very, very similar to the cards that went up due to the guild pairings in Guilds of Ravnica. If we take a look over, let's go ahead and look at the full price list of what's kind of going up here. Looks like standard, of course, is still mainly going down. A lot of unknowns here. If we do look at the cards that are going up, the Rootbound Crag, of course, these are a no-brainer. I think that everyone should be moving the vast majority of their inventory into these type of cards because these are a known quantity. If you still compare things like Rootbound Crag and Dragonskull Summit to cards like Drowned Catacomb that are twice as much as a value. If you go over to the same set in Dominaria, you can do the same thing with like the color pairings that did see a color pairing Guilds of Ravnica versus the ones that didn't, and you should expect them to follow suit. In fact, you should actually expect them to maybe increase a little bit more because they did get a little bit of demand from Guilds of Ravnica, and therefore this might be double dipping. And so sometimes going first isn't the best thing. Going second in this case might actually lead to prices going higher than if they were in Guilds of Ravnica. There is a lot of movement, though. Tons and tons of movement on the upward scale for the Rivals of Ixalan and Ixalan. Both of these have been quite quiet with Ultimate Masters. I think this is kind of the point of Market Monday, is we had the big boom of Ultimate Masters, and now the focus is being reshifted towards Standard, and it should really, really go hot, hot, hot for the next few weeks after the release of Ravnica Allegiance. Again, I don't think this is very similar to the past where they go big set like Kaladesh and then Aether Revolt, for example, right after. Yeah, there might be some cards that's a bad example because Aether Revolt actually brought a ton to the field. But Ixalan to Rivals of Ixalan, for example, that's a better example. That Ixalan, yeah, it shaked up the market. We had a new rotation. We had a bunch of people now buy into cards that were now more viable with Ixalan. And then Rivals of Ixalan came out. Standard didn't really do a ton at that time period. And so I think this one's going to be very, very different from that particular last rotation, where we're going to see as much or more of movement than we saw with Guilds of Ravnica. So you should definitely keep your checkbooks ready to make these purchases on cards that could go crazy. And even looking at, like I said before, the 3-color and 4-color pairings that now become viable with those lands, the shock lands that are coming in. And so a good thing is just to keep scanning these and comparing buy list. If you come over to Kamena, for example, with Merfolk, we have the market price and the mid very, very, very razor thin. That is also a very good sign for movement because usually mid will be 25% sometimes higher than market price. It'll be a substantial amount, not just a few cents. And if we go over to buy list, that actually seems quite low. To double check with Card Kingdom, usually the highest buy list is still $4.50. But a good thing too is if you see these numbers really start to go down, you also know there's a lot of movement on that card. Another way to go over it is to TCU Player. You can actually sort cards by their popularity, and it will also show you a lot of the movement of those particular cards. We have the Immortal Sun going crazy. We have Azure the Lawbringer. I don't know why. I don't think that's playable with the new Azorius, but we have a lot of speculation into these color pairings that now become viable. All right, so let's just close up this video. I'm not going to go too long today about particular cards. You can kind of go the wrap-up. I'll try to analyze this more with this topic. One of the things I'm going to start doing is on this channel, just kind of do the more rambly Market Monday, and then go over to my second channel called The Rogue Market. If you haven't subscribed, I highly, highly suggest you go subscribe to The Rogue Market, and I give a top 10 list based upon the information we kind of rambled here in the Market Monday. So closing, I think that this is my prediction for February and March. I think the focus is going to go back on Standard. I think there's going to be, especially with Arena just having record numbers playing the game, which is a good sign for Magic if they can keep the momentum. There are still some glaring holes with their the platform, with the direction of Magic. But in all, I do think that this has been a better direction for Magic than it's a net positive, not a net negative, how they've gone with the Arena. Yes, MTGO is dying. It still continues to die, and that's bad for the competitive type scene, but Arena is bringing more people to the game, and I think eventually these people are going to transition over to paper. At least a good majority of them, I think, will want to say, "Hey, I kick ass on Arena. I'm going to go beat some scrubs at my local game store," because that's the whole thing about Magic having a more personal experience. Hey, I'm great on this game. Even online gamers do that. They try to find like real life venues. Look at like Smash. And even League of Legends and Dota, you try to go find those local tournaments to go actually play people because you're just an unknown name on the internet. And I think that eventually they'll start to go over Rivals of or Ravnica Allegiance should be the big one. This should be where Arena is already way out of beta. Well, it's still in beta, but way out of the release, that stage, to where now they are familiar with the platform. They're familiar with what cards. They're doing it all right now, and they'll have their deck list ready. They'll go and buy this in paper, and we could see even a bigger boom in the paper prices. So I think this is also going to have the effect on the out of sight, out of mind. I think Commander is going to take a hit in February and March. I don't think there's going to be a lot of movement on those unless it's the staples. I don't see a lot of movement in Commander. There will be some cool pairings of any sort of legendary creatures. Look at Teysa that just came out that could go up as a result. And we'll look at those in future videos as well. But for all in all, I think Ultimate Masters is going to take a dip in February, March. I think Modern is going to take a dip. I think Pauper is going to get crushed again. And I think that the Standard is just going to be a very bull market. So I think that with that knowledge in mind, I think that's where a lot of people, that's where your focus should be. I'm not really focusing on Modern at the moment. It seems very, very quiet, especially with Ultimate Masters coming out. The last time we had a set this hyped, we saw a lot more movement in the market, and it just really hasn't done that. Besides, like I said earlier, with the Dredge and the Goryo's Vengeance deck, a lot of the other decks that got reprints from like anywhere from Snapcaster to Liliana to Noble Hierarch, not a lot of movement. So I think we're going to continue down that road until Modern can get hyped up again through some sort of event or some sort of people getting bored of Standard. Same thing with Commander, same thing with Pauper. I think that February and March is going to be the months of Standard. After that, though, we might see the same transition of the last boom of Magic. So since I've owned a game store, or since I've kind of been around in this industry, Magic has boomed 2 times I know of really, really hard. There's been some very quiet times too. The first one was with Return to Ravnica, right after Innistrad, Return to Ravnica, all the way through Theros. Really started cooling off about Born of the Gods and Journey of Nyx. Got revamped during Battle for Zendikar and really ramped up to about, I would say, Origins and Dragon's Maze. That was the other big boom of Magic. And then Origins, Dragon's Maze, you saw the transition of your average player. They all came in through Standard. And then rotation occurred or Standard stagnated. And we had so many people at that point go from Origins, Dragons, they've lasted one rotation, and they moved right into Modern or right into Pauper well, not really Pauper at that point. The road split into 2 ways. They got sick of Standard, they went into Commander, or they went into Modern. And that's when a lot of those type of sales, and you can double check this with card prices, that's when a lot of those type of cards started going up in value. Is you look at Battle for Zendikar, Oath of the Gatewatch for Modern and Commander staples, and we saw it again about Rivals of Ixalan, is where we saw a lot of movement for the Modern and the Commander. So I'm thinking that's gonna follow suit. We're gonna have a lot of investment in Standard. It's gonna cool off, and then's the time to really start to pull the trigger on the Modern type of stuff. So for now, I give my picks of cards you should go into is definitely the guild pairings. Those are the very safe route to go. I wouldn't fault you for just putting everything in Dragonskull summits and Drowned Catacombs. I just had it. The red green land, red green, blue green, white, black, and whatever the other pairing is. My mind is so fried right now trying to sort cards all day. But that's my advice right now. Look at some of the Knights type archetypes. Look at the Merfolk type archetypes. Look at Dinosaurs. All those will still have a ton of movement due to just testing cards. Don't ignore a bunch of these cards, decks, or color pairings still should get better. Like, I think Selesnya gets a lot better with Afterlife, with a bunch of those Afterlife type cards. Same with Boros. I think that kind of like fills some gaps in being swept by Deafening Clarion and then leaving something back doesn't feel so bad. So that leaves an opening for those actually to get better. So there could be some cards that still continue to go up because of cards coming out of Ravnica Allegiance. We'll continue with the spoilers, and I'll give my advice on those particular spoilers and look about cards that go up or down. Well, of course they'll go up. Yeah, there could be cards that go down because of cards that are being printed too, due to those spoiler cards. But I think this is good enough for this Market Monday. I hope you got some information out of this. Be sure to check out tomorrow for the Market Monday recap or at my other channel, The Rogue Market, and we'll give a top 10. I'll really scour through the data and give you my top 10 cards that I'm going to be investing in due to Ravnica Allegiance. Yeah, so that's my advice. If you have any Ultimate Masters, I think right now might be an okay time to shift the value over these standard specs and rebuy in after they start to go down 5-10% again, and then rinse and repeat. That's the name of the game. Anyway, this has been Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.